Hey Guru Nation, welcome back to the Clinical Trials Guru.com. Today we're going to be talking about, it's part 2 of maybe a 10-part series, unofficially, so I'm not actually titling them part 1 of 10, but we'll see how far we can go. I'm essentially breaking down and reverse engineering how a drug goes through the clinical trial process. So the last video I did was how sponsors choose CROs. And this video is going to be about how CROs choose sites and how CROs choose their principal investigators, which work at sites or own their own sites. Okay, so typically CROs have their own database of research sites, and so they've accumulated this database over the years of working with sites. Back in the day, like in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, really prior to the internet kind of taking off as far as clinical research is concerned, where nowadays we have websites like drugdev.org, which are essentially portals where investigators can self-register their sites and their interests in what studies, and then that is shared amongst all the sponsors and CROs. So things have gotten a lot more transparent, but one of the core competencies and one of the value adds that CROs used to say they had was their own database of PIs and of investigative sites. This is very similar to sites and how they tell CROs that, hey, we have our own database of patients. Now, sites actually can say that because that database is supposed to be kept confidential, unlike investigator databases where investigators typically want to be found. This is why they self-register on sites like drugdev.org and on CenterWatch, which is not as popular anymore, but it used to be back in the day. With patients, you have something called HIPAA, so they can't really prove that they have a database. There's no transparency there, right? So CROs typically take sites for their word. They take their word for it that they actually have the patients in their database. All right, but when it comes to CROs and how CROs choose sites, typically they have their own database, the CROs, of sites, or they will nowadays go to drugdev.org or another portal. There's a lot more collaboration in the industry now, whereas everything used to be closely guarded. Now there's a lot more cooperation, but CROs still keep their best sites. And by best, I mean the sites that are able to enroll quickly and don't commit very many, if any, protocol deviations. They tend to keep those as their go-to sites for when they are bidding on a contract from a sponsor. So they can go to that sponsor and say, hey, for this indication for schizophrenia, these are the sites we've used in the past. This is the screen failure rates. This is how quickly these sites randomize subjects. This is how quickly we were able to collect all data for that study. This is how many protocol deviations there were. These are the sites we're planning to use. What my CRO does is we have our sites that we work with. We also have sites that we own. We also have sites that we consult for. So we have a good relationship with many sites and many investigators. And now for the more difficult to enroll protocols, this strategy of going to your best research sites from the past may not always work, because those sites, while they may be experienced at conducting studies, may not have adequate patient population for a particularly challenging protocol. So in that case, you've got to go to where the patients are, right? You've got to go, and oftentimes those patients are at research-naive clinics. Research-naive physicians, physicians who have not conducted clinical research in the past. However, they have access to all these patients that would be perfect for the more challenging protocols. So there's a gap there between supply and demand, right? And one of the things my CROs tries to differentiate ourselves on is being able to bridge that gap and being able to train these research-naive physicians on how to do research trials. So that's one of the things that I think I'm bringing to the table as far as value add over the next decade. Now, that's typically not how CROs choose sites. Like I said, CROs choose sites based on past performance, based on who's in their database, and now there are websites like drugdev.org. They might use clinicaltrials.gov because oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes they will actually list the PI name for each site that has participated in a particular protocol. So if Pfizer is running a study and Quintiles is the CRO, and there was a previous study for the same indication run by Janssen in the past with INC Research as their CRO, and this is all just hypothetical. The Quintiles CRO, when they're selecting their sites for an upcoming study with a similar indication, could in theory go to clinicaltrials.gov if they needed additional sites and approach those physicians from the previous site. So that's typically how CROs choose sites. Now, if you're a research site, and it's all about timing, so if you time it right, if you're constantly pitching, constantly going on clinicaltrials.gov yourself, looking for new studies that are still in need of sites or still in need of patients, which means that they're probably still in need of research sites, and you're approaching enough CROs to participate in their upcoming trial, you actually have a pretty good chance of getting selected for a couple of these trials. And from my experiences, it's about 10%. Right? So for every 10 email pitches you send out, you'll probably get a response from one of them with a feasibility survey, and that will eventually lead to a site selection visit. So don't just rely on the CROs to find you out of the blue just because you have a website, or just because you have a Center Watch profile, or just because you're on drugdev.org. Be proactive. You go on clinicaltrials.gov, pitch your site to these CROs. Oftentimes they are looking for sites, and so you're making their job easier sometimes by reaching out to them and being proactive rather than hoping that they find you. So that's how CROs choose research clinics and investigators. And then of course, if you do a good job on the study that the CRO gives you, then you're going to be in their database. Just like those metrics I was telling you earlier, they keep track of everything. In fact, DrugDev is going to have a sort of like a credit score for every research site or every principal investigator. They're working on this now, and it's not just DrugDev, it's several vendors in the industry that are actually keeping track of every single metric you can think of to make their selection of sites more efficient. Alright, so hopefully this helps. Thank you very much for watching Guru Nation. If you need help getting more studies for your site, let me know. My consulting company can do that for you. We have a team of people that do nothing but round the clock do biz dev for sites. Give me a call, all right? 949-415-6256. You can also email me, Dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.